Hi, I'm Julie, and this is Stamp with Julie Baum. Thanks for tuning in to my YouTube channel today. I have a card tutorial that I'm going to show you today. This is one of the projects that we made at Stamp Club in March of 2023. So here we go. All right, so let's jump in with our project. We're going to be making this card, and it's actually a card that I cased from something that I did find on another site. It gave me a wonderful design to follow. And let me tell you that the paper here, the designer series paper, is found in the January to April mini catalog. It's on page 31. It's here. It's really a lovely collection of papers with mostly floral designs on the front and then subtle patterns on the back. It's called Regency Park, and it is a 6x6 pack of paper. I also wanted to point out that this ribbon here looks absolutely lovely. It's called Night of Navy bordered ribbon. I have not purchased that ribbon yet. However, I did pull from my ribbon stash this denim ribbon, which, although I'm not using it on today's project, looks so good with these papers. So I'm sure that I'll incorporate that into a project here real soon. All right, let's talk about our papers and our dimensions. So we're going to start with a piece of crushed curry cardstock. Our card base is actually just a panel. So this piece does not open. This measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Then I have a piece of crushed curry again. This piece is 2 1/4 inches by 10 1/2. And then what you're going to do is you're going to score it in the middle at 5 1/4 inches. So this is the flap that is going to open and shut. I have 2 pieces of basic white cardstock. These each measure 2 inches by 5 1/4. One is going to be on the front of our flap that opens, and one is going to be on the inside, like so. I'll also mention something about trimming those down, but wait till we get to that point. Then the next thing is our designer series paper. We're using 2 small strips. These are 3/4 of an inch by 5 1/4 inches. There's 2 of those. All right, so another thing that I like about this card, besides that it's unique in the way that the center flap opens, it just doesn't take a lot of paper at all. And so this is going to be a fun design to recreate over and over again. All right, the first thing that I'm going to do is just go ahead and work on our center flap. All right, so we're going to do some stamping. And the 2 stamp sets that I have chosen for this card are decorative borders. This is one of those sets that doesn't really jump out of the catalog to, slap you in the face and say, oh my goodness, it's so cute, I have to have it. But the pieces that are in here are going to be so widely used when you need to just add a little touch of something. We're going to be using this piece, which is very subtle, and then also this piece and this one. So it's one you're probably going to go back into your catalog and say, I don't even remember seeing that. So go look for that one. And then happy labels. I always like some of these sets of sentiments that have different sayings, something that goes beyond your thank you and your happy birthday. And these certainly fit that bill. So we're going to be using words from happy labels. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is use that little, it's kind of like a leafy vine stamp, this one. And I'm going to use, I've got everything here just outside of camera view. I'm going to use my gray granite ink pad. And as I'm picking this up, I can see that there's some sticky residue on my acrylic block. So this is a great time to throw in an extra tip, something that is helpful to know. Below each video that I put here on my channel, when you open that description box, I always have some links to some of my favorite tools that are non-Stampin' Up items. This is one of them. These little alcohol prep pads. I purchased them from Amazon, and there is a shopping link below this video if you want to go do that. This has multiple uses. What I'm going to use it for right now is cleaning the stickiness off of my acrylic block. Now, I'm not really sure why our acrylic blocks tend to get so sticky and dirty. It's not like we're usually putting them in ink or putting glue on them, but just from regular use and setting them down and so forth, they do tend to get a little grimy. So I'm just cleaning up a lot of these little edges, or surfaces, I should say. There we go, that one was stubborn. And you can see that that is a lot clearer. All right, now we're going to be ready to move on to our next step. Okay, we're gonna do the stamping. We're gonna use gray granite ink. And one of those 2 white pieces of paper. I am going to bring in a Stampin' Pierce mat, which most of the time I do prefer to use if I'm using photopolymer stamps. I've got some scratch paper here too because I'm going to stamp some of my ink off. So the first thing I'm going to do is ink up my stamp with the gray granite, stamp the ink off on my scratch paper. Then what I'm going to do is try to get the stem end of my stamp at the center of my cardstock up here at the top and get that image in place. I put my scrap paper back in place because I could see that I was going to be stamping off the edge of my cardstock. Not that this doesn't already have some ink on it, but actually when you do get ink on your Stampin' Pierce mat, it kind of stays wet a while, and then you have the possibility of smudging that onto something else. So I'm going to do the same steps. Ink my stamp first with gray granite, stamp some ink off, and now I'm going to flip my stamp around the other direction. So now the stem end is kind of meeting the other stem end right there near the center. And this is stamped at the top of that piece of paper, that piece of cardstock. Okay, now re-ink, stamp off. This time I'm going with the direction of the leaves at the center rather than the stem. And the last one, stamping off each time, flipping this around so the leaves are at the center, which I don't know that that's super important, flipping that around. But I did like how it looked. So there we've got our very light gray. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the other piece of white cardstock and stamp that little, kind of a little end cap, little border. And I'm going to determine if I want this dark or light. I think since I did this light, I'm going to do this light as well. So I've stamped ink off, and now I'm going to stamp it on my cardstock. All right, I didn't quite get to that end. See, this end looks better and this end, so I'm going to flip this over and try one more time. See if I can get it a little bit better. I'm going to turn this way so I can see better and position it in the middle. Let's see if that one is better. That seems to go more end to end. All right, now we're going to come back to this first piece, and with a Memento Black ink pad, I'm going to ink up the next stamp, and that is this beautiful long stamp with flowers and vine. It is a pretty big block that I had to mount this on. So just as a tip, when you have a really large block, sometimes it's a little awkward to maneuver it around on the ink pad. You can always lay it down with the stamp portion up, pick up your ink pad instead, and tap the ink down onto the image. That's a great way to ink some of your larger stamps. Okay, now that image is going to get stamped right in the center. All right, we've got our flowers stamped there. I'm gonna have to decide if one way looks better, up or down. I think it's pretty much the same. Now I'm gonna use some Stampin' Blends. So I have my Shaded Spruce Light and Dark. Now my poor Shaded Spruce has really kind of been through the ringer. It has gotten a crack in it, and so often when I open this end, it comes apart a little bit. Let's see if my tape is going to hold it together. All right, it's holding, but clearly this one is going to need to be replaced, but it's hanging in there. So I'm gonna quickly just hit the leaves. This is with my light Shaded Spruce. And I'm using the bullet tip. There's two sides of this marker, the bullet tip and the brush tip. So there are not a lot of leaves to color, just a handful. And honestly, I would usually be using my brush tip to do this, but as I mentioned, this poor marker is really beat up, and I know that the brush tip is not good. So this is probably the last time I will use this one. And it will probably have to get thrown out and replaced, but it has lived a long, happy life. You know, because I teach classes and I have Stamp Club, my tools and my markers and everything gets used by a lot of people, which is what I love. I love sharing my products, but they do take a little bit more use and abuse, perhaps, than some of you who are just crafting at home by yourself. All right, now with the dark Shaded Spruce, I'm just going to come in and put a few little accents. You know, it's pretty easy to determine because you're just going to put it where the artwork already has some lines and some detail. All right, once our greenery is finished, I can come in here with some blue. I'm going to use Balmy Blue and color my flowers. I'm going to move, this isn't necessary right now, so I'm going to move that out of the way. My brush tip for now is my choice, since I can get a lot of coverage fairly quickly. And then I'll come in with the dark Balmy Blue and just put a few, again, a few of those little accents right where the artwork is already kind of calling for it. This is where the Stampin' Blends really, really do, in my estimation, outshine our regular Stampin' Right markers. Those certainly do have a place, but the way that you're able to use the light and the dark of each of the blend combinations really creates some artistic looking designs, even if you don't consider yourself much of an artist, which I certainly don't. I can color, but I am not truly an artist. And so the way that those Stampin' Blends help my colored in images to look just a little bit fancier is very nice. All right, I'm just hitting those couple of smaller flowers with a yellow marker. This one is Daffodil Delight, and that was dark. Okay, now I've got that Memento Black ink sitting there. I'm going to add the words, "Life is better with you." So I'm going to get that inked up and stamp it on this same piece right here. Now this is going over the light gray leaves that we already stamped as a background. And there is that. Okay, so at this point, I am going to move this piece out of the way and bring in that other white piece that has the little side border there. and add my second sentiment, also with my black ink. And this one's going to go in the center. I will bring my Stampin' Pierce mat back in. There we go. And I just want to hug you. Isn't that sweet? Okay, all we need to do is put this together. I'm going to grab my liquid glue for starters and get this attached. Now here's an interesting thing about paper and measurements and folding. So this piece of our cardstock, which does measure 10.5 inches long, is scored at the middle. So that means from the middle to the edge is 5 1/4, and on this side as well. But what's odd is just that tiny bit of space that is used up when you fold it actually makes this a smidge shorter than 5 1/4, and this is how you can tell. This piece was also cut at 5 1/4, and when you put it on there, it's just a hair, I mean just a tiny bit longer than this piece. So not to worry, and it's not worth adjusting your measurements. It just isn't. It's too close of a measurement. So I've got my glue on here, and I'm going to attach this. This goes on the inside. I'm going to attach this right at the crease. I'm looking at my space above and below the white piece, trying to get that as equal as I can. And then I'm going to go ahead and place this down. Once that is in place, I'm just going to take some scissors and trim this off. Now let me show you. Once it's on your card, you probably wouldn't even ever know. So you could completely leave it alone and ignore it. But I guess I'm kind of fussy about it, and it's sticking out a teeny bit. So I'm just going to trim that hair of the white cardstock right off of there. So it's up to you if you want to do that little step or not. And then this is ready to go in place onto our cardstock. Okay, I also want to put this one on the front of that piece. So I'm going to get my liquid glue once again and attach it to the front. Of this, make sure it's all going the correct direction. And same thing, I'm going to put it to the far left up against the folded edge. I'm going to look at my top and bottom margins. I needed to slide it a little bit up. There we go. And get this into place. Okay, now I'm going to flip it over. I feel like I might have a little glue on me, and you never know if you have a little ink. You just don't want to be rubbing across that white cardstock, just in case you do have something on your fingers. Okay, and I need to line this up, only because my fold was a little bit wonky. So I'm going to reline this up and get my bone folder and just press it to make sure it's nice and even. This end right here. Just reinforce that crease. Okay, now let's attach it to our card. This is a little bit heavy piece. If you feel better about using tear and tape to add this piece to the card base, I could go along with that entirely. I've got my liquid glue here, so I'm going to just continue. But yes, tear and tape right there might be a really good idea. All right, this is going centered between the top and the bottom. You will have a tiny little border on the left and the right. There's no real special order. You could do this piece like I've done first, or you could have done these pieces first. It doesn't matter. It's just putting all of the pieces into place at this point. All right, and then the designer series paper is nice and thin, So I think the liquid glue is perfect for that. Otherwise, it might be overkill. You could also use your Stampin' Seal if you are a fan of that. Okay, so at this point, I'm checking my borders to both sides, right and left and top and bottom. I want to pull this a little bit down. There we go. All right, so there's my top piece of designer series paper. Now let's put the bottom one on. And we can stand back and look at what we've created. Same thing, top and bottom, side borders, as even as you're able to without really having to measure or make yourself crazy about it. Okay, so there we have it. We have a really, really different centerfold card like so, with some beautiful designer series paper. Now, if you notice, like I've noticed, that I do have a gray ink smudge right there. Do you see that? I'm going to attempt to use my sand eraser to remove that. Sand eraser is an item I get on Amazon. I will put a link to this item in the description of this video. Every now and then you can get lucky. It certainly is not going to erase big ink mistakes, but every now and then, if you just have something that is a little bit obvious, just kind of showing, sometimes you can have some real luck with a sand eraser. It kind of scrapes the paper itself so it's kind of just camouflaging it, but it does appear to remove that little ink that was jumping out. And look, that looks much, much better. So I do think that a sand eraser is an essential tool to have in your crafting supplies. So there we have our card. This was the second project from Stamp Club of March 2023. I thank you so much for watching, and I do invite you to subscribe to my channel. If you've enjoyed this card tutorial, or perhaps you've tuned in another time and you have not yet subscribed, I invite you to do that. When you do subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're notified each time that I put up a new video. And do remember to find all of the great information below this video in the description box. Until next time, happy stamping!